We did it.
Neil!
How many drummers does it take?
Well, if you're talking about me, it takes a lot.
Well, I don't think so. Let me tell you, you've done a whole heck of a lot in your career, my friend. And thank you. Hey, I love that banner.
I
Looks
see yours
familiar.
too, right there.
Thank you so much for being here. You're a drummer that I have known about for probably 20, probably 25 years, I think, since the first issue that I saw you in Modern Drummer magazine in the 90s. And then you did a clinic at Steve's Music in Toronto. And my friend Jason Leomanis said, you've got to meet Dave. He is not only an unbelievable drummer, but an awesome guy and a Gretsch guy. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've been
Wow.
busy traveling and whatnot. And so how you doing during this whole COVID thing?
Good. As best as anyone can be. It's definitely a new time. And I think a lot of guys are trying to, I don't even know if the word reinvent themselves is the correct terminology, but just try to figure it all out for the moment,
Yeah. What have you been doing since March?
I had a few drum clinics that fell through. I released a solo album at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Perfect timing. um, so when that took place, I started fiddling around here in my studio, and there was a bit of a lack of inspiration. So I ended up doing a bunch of around the house repairs. I built a deck in the back of my house. I did a bunch of stuff around my house. I just sort of unplugged from music and social media just to sort of clear my head and my spirit, and stayed pretty busy for a good 2 months doing that.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, practiced a little bit, and I'm back to the point where I'm anxious to do more of that, more focused practicing.
That is
Did a few drums recording sessions, which was cool.
okay.
You know.
This is good. I wanted to go back and talk about in the very beginning and talk about your past. And you're originally from Syracuse, New York, and growing up on R&B, pop, rock and country music. And you moved south to Florida in the 1990s, correct? Played in the club scene down there.
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain, like, how old were you when you started playing drums, and when did music enter your life, and when did you know that you wanted to be a drummer?
I started formally taking lessons when I was 12, in school programs, and started playing drum set in, I think, 1981 or 82. The first rock concert I went to, I think, was in 1985. My uncle took me to see David Gilmour
Wow.
on his About Face tour. And the drummer was Chris Slade, bald-headed drummer that, of course, played with The Firm and Manfred Mann and AC/DC. So he was the first live rock drummer I saw. And I remember being absolutely enthralled with that. And I think that is when it happened for me. That's when I believe I thought, my gosh, there's probably not a cooler thing on this planet that you could do, but to be on a stage like that, making that kind of music. So that's what began. I was 15.
15. What an impressionable time. That's amazing.
Yeah,
And
it
so
was absolutely amazing.
you did lessons early on, did you?
I did. I studied privately with a guy that was also a teacher at my high school, a guy named John Dixon, who studied formally at Crane School of Music, Potsdam, studied under Jim Petersack, and he was really good as far as directing me what I really needed to focus on. At that point, I wasn't a great reader, and my main focus was just drum set. So he tried to inspire me to get involved in mallet percussion and all the other percussion instruments in the percussion family. And I was sort of stubborn. I just wanted to play drum set. So that studying with John only took place for a short period of time. And then I started studying with Frank Briggs.
Oh, Okay.
And
Wow.
that was absolutely incredibly enlightening. He was amazing. And the cool thing about Frank was Frank would show me rudiments and whatnot and certain practice uh, exercises and how they directly related to the drum set, which of course intrigued me. I was kind of a hard to motivate when I was younger, and I just wanted to play, you know.
Yeah.
And unless somebody showed me a specific skill set and how it applied to the drum set, I didn't get excited. He was really great about opening my eyes to that. And then I studied with the great Wilby Fletcher. Wilby Fletcher was a drummer that grew up in the Baltimore area, and of and was in New York City. Played with McCoy Tyner and Roberta
Wow.
Flack, and just fantastic. And he ended up being in Syracuse for a few years, and I studied with him, and that was absolutely amazing. And these were all teachers I had in Central New York before I
Okay.
moved to Florida.
But that's right. That's right. Frank is from New York State.
Yeah, I
Right.
believe Frank is from the Utica area. He's been in Los Angeles for over 20 years now. And
I work out of that comprehensive, that book of hit this, the modern drum set.
oh,
I practice out of this thing, and it's unbelievable. I can't recommend Frank's material enough. It's so great, all of it.
I say this a lot, and I don't. In certain drum circles, I know that he's known, but as far as I'm concerned, he's probably absolutely the most underrated, unknown drummer on the planet. I mean, the guy he's frighteningly amazing and incredibly musical. He's got such a sophisticated touch and
Yeah.
just really, really amazing drummer. And to boot, he's just an outstanding human being. I mean, the guy is just the greatest. He's such a cool guy. He was such an inspiration in my early days, not only as a teacher, but just as a human being. Here was this guy that was just such a amazing talent in a small music pool of Syracuse. And he was the most humble, down to earth guy. He would answer all my silly questions, about gear. And I think probably at times I was just an annoyance, but he never made me feel like that. He's just a really super cool dude.
How old were you when you studied with Frank?
Uh, I think 18 or
Yeah.
19, but I knew him for many years prior to that. He worked part-time at a music store. So I would go in and hang out, and just be the young kid hanging out. And some of the other people that worked at the store, you know, kind of treated me like an annoyance, but Frank was always just cool. He was just really the best, man.
That's
And
awesome.
that was one of the biggest things I took away from him. Uh, I guess later on in my years as I got older, realizing the level of talent he was and how humble and cool he was. And I took that uh, to heart and thought, if I ever get to a point, I want to be like that. I want to be a cool guy, a very approachable guy. So thanks, Frank, if you're watching. Thanks for
Yeah,
being.
you know what? I'll definitely tag him and let him know that we were talking about that. You and I were chatting here, and I've never met him in person, just on through social media. But bought the book and went. This is very much like when I studied, where I took lessons at Ontario College of Percussion. The teacher I had there, Robin Boers, he and Frank's material very, very similar, I find. So what happened to you? What happened in your life musically next when you were 18, 19 years old? And fill us in. Where were you playing? Who were you playing with? What kind of stuff?
Yeah, I was playing a lot on the local scene in Syracuse. I was fortunate. I had the opportunity to play with a lot of older players,
Mm-hmm.
which I tried to capitalize on, and I learned a lot from that experience. Then I graduated from high school, went to Cortland State for a year for something totally contrary, totally different to
Right.
the music. I was in athletics, so I thought maybe I was going to become, I don't know, a health instructor or
Yep.
physical therapist, something along those lines. And I only stayed at Cortland for a year. And while I was at Cortland, I was playing with a rock and roll band that I played with for a few years prior to leaving to go to college. That was based out of Syracuse University. Um, and I ended up leaving after the first year just because I was making more money playing in the rock band than I was doing my work study job at college. And it was, I guess, somewhat of a distraction, but in the long run, not really, because it ended up being, you know, the pursuit of my life afterwards. So went went back to Syracuse, studied a little bit, played some, and then moved to Central Florida.
Wow. Okay.
That was a few months after I turned 21. I packed up and moved
Wow.
down to Florida. My brother had a summer home down there, so I had a place to stay and just started in the scene. Just tried to break in, and I believe it was one of the reasons for that was the Central New York area. There was a lot of talented people, a lot of talented musicians, and I was low on the pecking order, so I was frustrated with not having the opportunity to play out and get the experience I needed. So,
Sure.
um, and as you know, being from Canada, the winters are treacherous.
Oh, they're lovely here.
Yeah, so being 21, going down to Florida, seeing my brother's summer place, I was like, this is a no-brainer. Why am I even in Syracuse anymore? You know, so going down to Central Florida, there were a lot more music opportunities.
Yeah.
12 months out of the year,
Yeah.
and I landed a little top 40 gig with a group of people. I think my first gig with them was 1991, Thanksgiving Day, 1991,
Wow.
and just started playing full time.
That's awesome. I love Florida. We spent almost a month in Florida this past winter, and just to get away from the winters here. And I'm in cottage country, and 90 minutes north of Toronto. So there's snow and it's cold, and I totally don't blame you. So
Yeah.
when you were playing in Florida, what happened? You had a connection with Les Dudek, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I was playing out quite a bit. Um, had an opportunity to study with some great players down there. A guy named Dave Reinhardt, absolutely phenomenal drummer, who was playing with Richard Elliott. Richard Elliott's a saxophone player that was on the smooth jazz circuit. Also, I believe, played with Tower Power.
Okay,
And then there
wow.
was another great drummer named Kenny Suarez, um, who I started Latin stuff with. And so that was primarily the Tampa scene. And I hooked up with an entertainer named Dennis Lee, who played fairs and festivals about 6 months of the year. So I was touring nationally around the country,
Wow.
and I basically made enough money during those 6 months just to come back to where I was living in Lakeland, Florida, to practice and play
Yep.
local gigs. So that was sort of the plan, to be able to finance my ability just to woodshed and to grow. That was sort of my musical schooling, if you will, along with studying with Dave Reinhardt and Kenny Suarez, and I also studied with Chuck Silverman for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a guy.
So being home from touring with uh, Dennis Lee, I went out to a club one night and sat in with a blues artist that I played with off and on, named James Peterson. And it happened that this guitar player named Les Dudek was playing,
Wow.
sitting in at the same time. I got up and played a song, and then Les came up and sat in and played. And so I'm very young. I'm 24, and I knew of Les's name. I knew that he had done some cool stuff, but I really didn't know the significance of Les and his solo records. But long story short, we started playing some sort of halftime shuffle groove, and I started playing it, and he turned around and looked at me, and I thought, well, either this guy thinks I suck or he's digging it. And it ended up he liked it. So we played a few songs together, and we sort of hit it off, musically speaking, and ended up sitting at the bar and closed the club down and just talking, and he was man, he was just so rich in experience. At that point, he was in his 40s and had
Yeah.
just moved back to Central Florida from Los Angeles. And longer the short of it, um, he had said that he had this album in the can, which I didn't even know what in the can meant. So he had this album that was almost finished. He had one track that he needed to complete. That was the title track for the album. And he said, you have a vibe very much like the drummer that played on the rest of the album, and I kind of want to stay with that vibe. He goes, would you be interested in cutting the track? And I said, I'm 24, I'm trying to be cool. I'm like, yeah, sure. Of course. And I said, yeah, give me a call, we'll talk about the bread. Just to sound cool. I would have done it for free, but and so he continued to talk to me about the project, and he said the drummer that had done all the other tracks was a good friend of his and passed away. Now, I had no idea who it was, and I felt bad, and I asked, that's really sad, who was the other drummer? And he said Jeff Porcaro. And I nearly fell off my drum off the bar stool. Still, again, 24, trying to be cool. So we exchanged numbers, and nothing happens. 2 days later, I get a machine on my answering machine, or a message on my answering machine that the session was a go. The executive producer, was going to fund the last track, and
Wow.
we were on. So, yeah, my first master session at the age of 24 was with Les Dudek for an album that Jeff Porcaro played on. So
No pressure there, right? But he was
no.
and it's funny when I see you play and hear you play. I mean, you do have that vibe, and I
Well,
try to channel that, man. But that's incredible. How did it turn out?
It turned out great. I was very nervous. I was really young and green, and Les produced the project, and basically he stood in the drum room. It was a huge studio. It was at Greg Reich Studios in Altamont Springs, which is a real big sound stage. They did a lot of film track scoring there for Disney, and so it was a really large room. And he just sat in front of me, and we looked at each other, and I watched his foot. There was no click, and basically conducted he basically told me what he wanted, and he just said, this is what Jeff would do. This is what Jeff would do. This is how he would play it. And I basically just played the way he told me to play. Now, the name of the album is Deeper Shades of Blue. And right. Of course, I'm very proud to be on it. But if there's any Porcaro fans that are not familiar with that record, Jeff is off the chain badass. It's like, wow. It's like a rock and blues record. And, it's just incredible.
That's cool.
And that was definitely a side of Jeff's playing that I wasn't familiar with. It's just in your face rock and roll.
Yeah, and he had that influence from loving Jimi Hendrix, right? And
oh yeah,
that's incredible. I'm gonna check that out. That's awesome. And holy smokes, no click. You played that to no click.
No click, and I'm pretty sure that Jeff didn't play with a click, and coincidentally, I know that one of the questions you wanted to talk to is how did I become aware with Gretsch drums? Well,
thank you.
I was, while we were in the studio, actually after I cut my tracks, I continued to hang out with Les. I mean, why wouldn't, a young guy like myself want to absorb as much information and get as much experience from a guy like him who had played with Cher and Boz Scaggs and Steve Miller. Wow. and all the records that he had played on. He played on the Allman Brothers, Brothers and Sisters record. He just had done so much. So that obviously that was very enticing to me to be around someone like that and to get as much experience as I could. So in passing, he asked me, do you know what kind of drums Jeff used? And I said, yeah, he was a Pearl endorser. And he goes, no. He goes, he may have endorsed Pearl, but he used a Gretsch kit on my session. And he also used a 4x14 DW piccolo snare too.
Wow.
But he used, the pictures he showed me were a purple kind of a purple looking Gretsch kit.
Really?
And that was the first time that I knew that Jeff was a Gretsch guy. So all these years, the sound in my head that I was attracted to, that I really wanted to emulate, was not Pearl. And nothing against Pearl, and I have friends at Pearl, and I love Pearl drums. But Porcaro's sound was Gretsch in recording. I went on to work with Paul Jamerson,
Oh,
JMO,
wow, JMO. Yeah.
through my connections with Gretsch when I went out to the West Coast when I was playing with Travis Tritt. And JMO, obviously, as most people know, was Jeff's drum tech for Toto for many years and did his cartage in the studio. And that reaffirmed, you know, Jeff's connection with Gretsch and his sound, recording sound. And JMO had reconfirmed, which I already knew, that Jeff's A and B kits were both Gretsch. So that was when things started to, I guess, connect for me at a young age. And at 24, I wasn't really, I wasn't really in search of my sound yet. I was still just playing, and I think that's a gradual evolution to most drummers as they continue to learn their instrument. It's not just about how you're playing the drums. You start becoming connected to how the drums respond and how they feel when you play. And then when you start to experiment with different head combinations, you start getting different tonal characteristics out of the drum, and inherently certain head combinations and certain drums are only going to give you a certain sound. And if there's something that you're looking for that drum and that setup doesn't give you, then, obviously you're looking at the wrong instrument, and
I see.
that was an epiphany for me. So once I moved to Nashville, I really started to hear drummers that had great sounding stuff, and it became a necessity. If you were doing sessions, you couldn't just bring a bunch of crap into a recording session. Engineers expected the source to be good. They could make what you had sound good, but if you wanted to be successful and you wanted to work, if you had a good source off the bat, then usually an engineer would take your number.
Wow, terrific. Did you play a Gretsch kit on the Les Dudek track, or what was there?
No, I didn't. And that's interesting. I should post some pictures after we do this interview. I played a Yamaha Tour Custom kit. It was a drum set I bought in Syracuse through Frank Briggs,
Okay,
at Bonnie Music. And I used Zildjian cymbals, and I can't remember what the snare drum is. I know I have a picture of it, but that's what I was playing.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
When did you play Gretsch drums for the first time? And
1995.
Okay.
Excuse me. After I got the Travis Tritt gig. Actually, I'm sorry. I played some Gretsch kits in the 90s, the mid 90s, when I started doing sessions here in Nashville. Some of the studios had house kits, and they were different. They definitely had a vibe compared to anything that I was playing and had played. And then when I got the gig with Travis Tritt in 2000, Dinah Gretsch signed me up as an endorser.
Yeah, wonderful.
And I got my first Jasper Gretsch kit I still have today. And I've been with them 20 years. They're amazing.
Unbelievable. What was that drum kit that you got the first? What was the color? What are the sizes?
I wonder if you could see. There's part of it right here.
Oh, holy smokes! How big is that room, Dave? That's a big room.
This is part of it. I'll take you around here to show you the front.
Holy, I see your posts on IG and on Facebook, and there's always some Gretsch envy, let me tell you. You have some
So there's
beautiful.
part of that kit. And then
Oh,
there's another one over here.
that's. Oh, look at that! I love that. Now it's funny that badge looks like it's an old school badge, even though it's not. You don't see
Yeah.
the
And
vintage
then
badge for.
there's another one here.
Wow, that's a lot of drums. That looks like a 24 on that. Is that
It is.
yeah?
It is. And
Wow.
then I've got a few snare drums up there.
Yes, you do. You've got some. Look at this.
This is a new drum that is I'm very fond of. It's a where is it? Yeah, that's a 6x14 chrome over brass prototype.
Okay, what's different about it than what you can buy?
It's only a 6. The
That's what
standard
I thought you said. That okay, it's a 6. Wow.
and the standard size is a 6.5.
Yeah.
That's a
Wow.
recent drum. So with
Hang on.
yeah. Well, I'm very fortunate. So I have the first kit I ever received from them, and it was interesting when Dinah signed me. Agreed to have me on as an endorser. It was at a NAMM show. It was at the NAMM show in 2000 in Nashville, and Paul Cooper, who was the production manager, was standing over there. And Dinah said, "Well, yes, we'd love to have you. We're huge Travis Tritt fans. We have some instruments in the Georgia Music Hall of Fame, as does Travis, So, the whole connection was Travis Tritt. She was a huge Travis Tritt fan, and Travis is from Georgia. So she said, go over here to Paul and give your order to Paul. So I was okay. So I walked over to Paul and I'm like, okay, so I'm supposed to give you my order. Am I getting a kit or am I paying for a kit? And he looks up at me and he goes, it's one of these things. He was like, looking down like this. He goes, oh yeah. If she says, give you your order, you're getting a free kit, because he had glasses on. It was funny. So I was like, all right then.
So that
So
is
I gave him a big order, as many drums as I could fit in one order.
nice.
And
That is awesome. What are the sizes of that kit? Because there's a lot of drums. Let's run them down.
yes. Okay. So that very first kit is Caribbean Blueburst. So it's a teal green that fades to black. And I ordered a 7x8, an 8x10, an 8x12, and a 9x12, a 9x13, 14x14, 14x16, an 18x22, and then I ordered a 8.5x14, and then a 20 lug 6.5x14.
It's
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big order, and they were gracious in honoring that. And then over the years, that 24 that you saw,
Yeah.
that's an 80s badge, 16x24. I found that on eBay, and I also found a 16x16 80s and on eBay. So, and then I also found a 16x20.
Oh, I love that
80s
sound.
badge. Yeah. So I within that one big kit that I received from Gretsch, I bought enough orphan drums over the years that now I have 3 complete kits. So I could have one on the road. I have one for recording in the studio, and then I have one to be able to play around. So
This is awesome. I love it.
yeah.
I interviewed with Chris Fryer recently, and he showed his collection of snare drums, Gretsch snare drums, and I think there's approximately 50 of his.
Oh my God, he's got 50 Gretsch snare drums.
50 Gretsch snare drums, and he was also a Pearl endorser. So he said he has another bunch of Pearl snares, and he said he thinks he has a problem. So
yeah, why don't you give me his address? I'm gonna go take a visit.
Okay, you and I will go together. Okay.
At nighttime with a flashlight.
That is awesome. I wanted to ask you how the Travis Tritt gig came about.
Oh yeah, cool. Man, that was a great time and a fantastic band. I was so lucky. When I first moved to Nashville, I thought with the Les Dudek credit, my destiny was going to be the next Eddie Bayers. Well, that wasn't the case. I was sorely disappointed at how difficult it was to break into the Nashville recording scene.
Sure.
And I had some success, but my focus was to stay in town, because back then there were two kinds of guys: road guys and studio guys. So you had to choose what your focus was going to be. So the first 5 years, I tried hard to stay in town, but I was really green. I was very green, and I needed more experience, I guess, overall experience. And so I started taking auditions in 2000, and I had some friends. I had already been in Nashville for 5 years. So I had some friends that were connected, and I got some good auditions. And I didn't get any of the gigs that I auditioned for. And I had a good friend that I was playing with named Brian Hinchcliffe, who unfortunately passed away this year. He was a great bass player, and he was battling cancer for many years, and
Sorry.
and sadly passed away early this year, before all this insane COVID stuff happened. But he was playing with a guy named Michael Peterson,
Yes.
who was a country artist, and Michael's management company was the same as Travis Tritt's. So he had an inside line, knowing that Travis was going to be putting a new band together, and said that you would be a great drummer if you were interested in auditioning. And at that point in 2000, I had auditioned for Pam Tillis. I lost it to Rich Redmond. I auditioned for a guy named Clay Davidson, who is no longer around. I auditioned for Trisha Yearwood, and I lost that to Elton John's drummer. Forgot his name.
Charlie Morgan.
Charlie Morgan. Yes. Wow, what a great drummer.
Yes, he is, and great guy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at that point, I was like, yeah, man, sure, whatever. I'll give you a press kit. You can send it to the management company, or I'll send it. Really not thinking anything of it. And by this time, it was early spring. So basically, everybody that was putting bands together had already put their band together.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, I get a call from Travis Tritt's management, and they asked if I'd be interested in auditioning. I'm like, yeah, of course. This is kind of cool. Gary Falcon, the name of the company was Falcon Goodman Management. And Gary Falcon was a West Coast guy. I believe he was from San Francisco. And, Les Dudek is not really a household name, but he knew who he was. And he was impressed by that, which impressed me because, again, he wasn't like just a household name.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons why I guess he contacted me. And 2 days after they wanted me to audition, they called to schedule my audition. And they said in passing that, look, we want you to audition the first audition at this specific time, but we also need a drummer to play all the other auditions, the bass auditions, the keyboard and fiddle auditions. Would you be interested in playing for those auditions, and we'll pay you? And I thought, yeah.
That's
So
great.
I had a chance. I had a huge advantage. I played with Travis a lot more than any of the other auditioning drummers, and they had some great drummers. Mike Kennedy, who played with George Strait. George Strait had been off for a while. He auditioned, and Lee Kelly, who plays with Hank Jr. He auditioned. Great drummer. And so all these drummers auditioned, and the very last audition was Ian Wallace, Don Henley's drummer.
What?
And I was thinking, you know what? He's going to get the gig. Ian Wallace, such a monster. He's such a great drummer, and I was such a fan. And I thought, I have a pretty good shot with all these other guys, only because I've had an opportunity to play with Travis more than everybody through all these auditions. But I thought the very last guy auditioning, Ian Wallace, just like Charlie Morgan. I'm going to lose it to the big name. But I didn't. Rest is history. I had the gig for 9 years.
That's crazy. And he was hot then. Travis
Yeah. He
was hot.
had a new record deal with Sony. He had taken some time off. He put out some great records, man. He always had great records to begin with, but the four that he released when I was there, or yeah, it was four. Yeah, they were killer. Greg Morrow played on three of the albums, and then he had Vinnie Colaiuta and Kenny Aronoff play on the last one. No, yeah, just man, I tell you, just great songs, great sounds. Yeah, and I love Travis Tritt, one of the best I've ever worked for. Great guitarist, great singer, great entertainer. Yeah, man. Superstar.
Were you now? How did you approach learning songs, learning the drum parts? Were you supposed to copy what Vinny and Greg Morrow and Kenny were doing, or could you take some liberties and play things your own way? Because the band was different than they were all session guys that played on his record, correct?
Yeah.
So, but it was different anyway.
Travis being a player too, his whole thing was, honor the important parts. Learn. I always took the approach that I was going to learn it exactly like the record, and then over time make it my own, and maybe however I could make it work the most for the live situation, because sometimes the recordings don't always lend themselves to the live application.
Right.
So as long as they were musical and they made sense, he didn't care. He was, because he was a player. He wanted things to sometimes be slightly different for inspiration, as long as you kept it, like I said, musical.
The tempos I find are sometimes for live, you might push the tempos a little bit. Did you play with a click live
Yeah, at first, no. And, I would use a click just to get the tempos, and then we'd rock through it, and I'd turn it off. And then in the middle of the gig, probably a few years after I had the gig, I started to, just for my own well-being, sort of as an exercise. But the band was so good and so dialed in. We had played together for a long time, and everyone's had very, very good time. So it was like, if I had the click track on, it would disappear, And if we went to like a solo section and we started moving a little bit, I just turn it off. It was all about it breathing, which I think live music should, And the click was only there as a reference, and very much a live gig, man.
Was he particular about tempos being the singer? I've experienced that, where they want the tempos need to be in a certain range.
Mm-hmm. And we communicated a lot about that. He sometimes had a tendency to get a little excited and push, and diplomatically, I would always say to him, would you like me to increase the tempo of this particular song, because it felt like you were pushing a little bit.
Yep.
And I would review show CDs and show tapes on a regular basis.
Yep.
And sometimes he would connect with me and say, hey, you know what? It feels like it needs to come up some. And, diplomatically, I'd always say, okay, I'll listen to the show CD. Why don't you do the same? And then let me know tomorrow, knowing that it probably didn't need to move. He just needed to pull it back,
Right.
But you're not going to tell your boss, say, hey, dude, you're pushing. Why don't you just relax?
Yeah.
And generally speaking, he would realize that, because he was a player. And then on occasion, he would say, yeah, I'd like it up one. I feel like it needs to, I need it to have a little bit more energy.
That's terrific. We have a question here. So, David, would you please share the hi-hat pattern that you played with Boz on Lowdown? There's a YouTube video where you're playing with Boz. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, I played 16th notes, and that's what Jeff played on the recording. Some people, I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but when Jeff originally tracked that, he played 8 notes on the hi-hat, and the hi-hat part, the 16th note part is an overdub.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that hi-hat part that is predominant, that 16th note hi-hat, is actually an overdub. And when I was playing it, rather than just playing regular 16th notes, I was playing alternating 16th notes. And when I came to the 16th note kick drum part, ba-boom,
Yes.
I played a double on my right hand. So I'll see if I can show you.
That's cool. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Good question, Ra.
And it was just see if you could see the hi-hat. Yeah, it was just a habitual thing, I guess.
Oh, this is awesome. Live from David's place.
Can you see the hi-hat here?
Sure can, yes.
So the groove being what I ended up doing was
That's cool.
as opposed to
That is really cool.
yeah, it was just sort of a habitual thing. It's I don't know why I did it, but that's how I ended up playing. And I remember a few people when I started posting the videos, they were like, "Hey man, what's the sticking that you're playing?"
Right. I swear I see a double in there somewhere.
Yeah, and that's how I did it.
That's awesome. Who were your drum heroes? We never talked about that, and I haven't really asked very many of my guests. But who are some of the drum heroes that you had back in the day, as opposed to, well, and how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, great question. I know early on, John Bottom was huge.
Yeah, sure.
Stuart Copeland of the Police, he was my first, drum hero. I was
Yeah,
really enamored with. Neil Peart, of course. Keith Moon, Kenny Jones, both guys from the Who. Simon Phillips, I loved. Steve Smith, I loved. Peter Erskine. These are all guys early on. And I still have a huge admiration for these guys. Jonathan Mover was huge.
Yes.
And then when I started reading album credits, Jeff Porcaro's name kept coming up, and I didn't know there was a such thing as a session guy. So Jeff was definitely on my radar. Steve Gadd was another one that was on my radar. The majority of the guys that I mentioned earlier were band guys. They were in bands. So that was the thing that enticed me to seek out who was the drummer, because they were bands. Larry Mullen Jr. was another one. But as I got older, I seemed to always, I really liked the guys that played these effortless, just perfect tracks for songs, like Russ Kunkel and Tim Keltner and Jim Gordon and both Jerry and Rick Marotta. They just, I'd hear these songs, and I would, back then, you'd look at the album and you would find out who played them. And I thought, man, it was just like the drum part. There was something about it,
Yep.
I was too young to really understand or question it, but it just seemed like the drum part was perfect, and the grooves were perfect. And I was really attracted to that, above and beyond, the notey playing.
Right.
Just the I don't know, just the musicianship, just the articulation, how musical it was. And so that was, that started, early on. And then I discovered, somebody turned me on to Dave Weckels' instructional DVD.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a VHS, and everything changed. Everything changed. I loved Neil Peart, but there was a whole different thing above and beyond that. Phil Collins was a huge influence, still is. But then, I I was turned on to Weckl, then I was turned on to Vinnie Colaiuta, and then Dennis Chambers,
And
uh, and Steve Jordan, and just things went off the end when I started listening to those guys, and I remember when I moved to Florida that I think I basically stopped listening to radio, and I just really got into fusion guys. And it was interesting when the 90s came about, uh, you know, popular music had changed, and I wasn't hip to it because my head was so directed someplace else. I turned on the radio and I'm like, what is grunge? You know, because
I
I was at a different place, listening to all these guys studying this stuff, going out and seeing jazz fusion bands in Florida play this stuff.
I can't believe how similar our tastes are. I'm 53, and so we're probably around the same age. But it was the same.
Yep.
The transition from Neil to Weckl to Vinny to Smitty Smith. Those
Oh
Buddy
yeah.
Rich Memorial Scholarship videos. I had never seen Dennis Chambers play before. I'd never seen Smitty Smith play, and I'd seen Omar play. But man, those
Yeah.
guys.
Omar.
And I couldn't relate to what was going on in the 90s with the grunge stuff. It just wasn't my thing. So
No.
I was more into the funk and the fusion kind of thing. My poor girlfriend at the time had to endure listening to Weckl's Master Plan
Yeah.
and stuff like that. That's really cool. And I love session guys like yourself. This is awesome.
Yeah. One of the guys that I think one of the biggest influences that changed everything for me was David Garibaldi. He was, when I found out, his influence over Weckl, I could relate more closely with the way that Dave Garibaldi played than Weckl. It was just there was just a different depth of soul to his playing, that
Like,
really attracted
yeah, right.
me.
We have a question here. It says, David, your left hand does a lot apart from the downbeat. Could you please give us your thoughts on ghost notes and the left hands? That's from Solly Mehta, it looks like.
Yes, Sully's a great friend of mine from New York. Yeah, the whole ghost note thing significantly impacts the groove, not only for what you're playing in a recorded track, but also influences the players that you play with, because there's a lot of subdivisions that are taking place. And I think those subdivisions give the groove and give players a bit to grab a hold of beyond just the backbeat. And one of the things that helped me develop that was learning how to play a blues shuffle, listening to Tommy Brecklin when he played with Robin Ford.
Yeah.
Absolutely another huge influence. Tommy Brecklin is a bad boy. And
funny. And a funny dude, yes.
Continue. Yeah, one of the best shuffle players I've ever listened to. And the beautiful thing about him is if there's players out there that aren't hip to the early Robin Ford Blue Line records, you need to go back and listen to him, because there's no shuffle patterns that he plays that are the same. Everything is different. He has different ghost notes he plays. So listening to him a lot it enlightened me on the importance of the left hand, and how the independence of the left hand and developing the left hand, how much that impacts the groove. Another guy was Chris Layton, the great Chris Layton for Stevie Ray. So playing the blues shuffle impacted my left hand quite a bit, as well as Jeff Beccaro's ghost notes on all that he played with the halftime shuffle and the full-time shuffle. Bernard Purdy is another huge influence that did the same thing. And I had been asked and continue to get asked a lot about those things when I play drum clinics, and there's the mechanics, the sticking of the ghost notes that are essential, and that's how we learn to imply those things when we're playing the backbeat, the notes between the backbeat. But the real challenge is the feel and the finesse. And it's one of those things that just takes place over time. It's a touch thing, it's not, it's something that can't be forced. It's something that has to be felt.
Do you play lighter now than you did when you were younger?
Absolutely. I'm an old man. No, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is. I think sometimes we extend too much energy on volume, where there's only a certain volume that you're going to get out of the drum, and then if you hit it too hard, you end up choking it.
Yes.
And I think that's the same with cymbals. Sometimes cymbals sound so much more lush and sustain longer if you don't hit them so hard. So it becomes a tonality thing. And I remember years ago reading something about Simon Phillips. Simon Phillips was playing with, I believe, Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa approached him. I think it was Frank Zappa. I can't remember who it was, but he had sat down and showed Simon the physics of hitting a drum or just striking things, and the fact that there's only a certain volume and velocity that you can get out of sound, and then afterwards you're wasting energy. So I thought, wow,
that's incredible.
Profound.
That's incredible. Our friend Rich Redmond is here. Hey, Rich, nice to see you.
Brother Rich.
He's here.
Love Rich.
I don't know him, but I've certainly seen many, many videos and lots of friends that do know him. So we're wrapping things up a little bit here. Could you give some advice on younger drummers who want to do what you do for a living? What would you tell them if they were 17, 18 years old? What would you tell somebody?
Get as much live experience playing with human beings as possible. I think it's really important to play with tracks at home. I think it's seriously important to play along with recordings of your favorite drummers, in hopes that the other musicians that are playing along with those favorite drummers are good players. Yeah. I listened to a lot of Jeff Porcaro and played along with Toto Records, so I was playing along with Mike Porcaro and Steve Porcaro and Steve Lukather and Paige, and I think that helped develop my time and my time field. I think that's super important. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is playing with other human beings. I think in some regard, there's a tragedy with the way social media is, and we all want to play in our bedroom, and that's good. We learn by that, but there is nothing that will ever replace playing with another human being. And ultimately, everything that we do in the practice room is preparation for that. Yes. You have to learn how to ebb and flow in music. If you're playing along with tracks all the time, that is a human attribute that you're missing out on, because music is alive. It breathes. It's not supposed to be stiff and sterile. And if you don't have that approach, there's so much that you're missing, especially with the synergy of playing with other human beings, live and recording. It's just there aren't a lot of words to describe it, and those that have the opportunity to experience it know exactly what I'm talking about. So as young people, as a young drummer, make an effort to be live with other musicians recording and other musicians live performing. That is where the rubber meets the road. That is the quintessential musical experience.
That's fantastic. Chris Fryer was saying the same thing. At a young age, he was playing jazz. He was 18 years old, and he was playing jazz with cats that were in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And for a couple of, that's irreplaceable. So
absolutely,
that's fantastic. Where can people find you on the web, sir?
Yes, excellent. Social media. I don't tweet very much. I let the president do that. It's not a forum I'm a fan of, but I know it's a social media outlet. But definitely here at Instagram, I'm on Facebook quite a bit. My solo CD can be purchased directly through me.
Yes. Yes.
I have a website that is under construction, but you can buy my CD there. But if you reach out to me direct, I do PayPal and Venmo, which is really, really easy to.
Yes, there it is there. I
Yeah,
recommend folks. I've heard some of this and it is awesome. Definitely.
and I'll definitely get you one up there to Canada.
That'd be
Um,
great.
and then where else? Yeah, my website again is not completely finished, but you can get it there as well. Um, and you can also download the CD on Apple Music. But as far as getting in contact with me, social media, um, I teach. I do some remote sessions, doing some remote recording at the house, and just trying to stay busy during this strange time.
It is definitely a strange time, and you were right early on talking about trying and reinventing ourselves and just trying to adapt to what's going on. And but we don't really even know where we're gonna land. So, but in the meantime, I wish you well. At the end of this, since you ended up going live instead, we connected that way. When you press end, if you could see if it could save it to your IG video, that way we will have it on your Instagram, the whole interview for people to watch afterwards. So when you click end, and it'll give you an option to delete or to save it to your IG, save it to your Instagram. That way we have this. You were
Excellent.
wonderful today. Thank you so much for being such a great person to be in contact with and arrange things, and just a super cool guy and such a great musician. And man, and I love that banner. And
Thank
ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to the Gretsch Afternoon Drum Break, episode number 16. Next week, we have another awesome guest. And everyone, take care. And I think you have to end things, David. So I appreciate you and
Thank you.
your time. And everybody, you take care. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, take care now.
God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.